Y'all look anything like Mussolini? Before we start reading I start trying to respond to the ones requested here by a studio audience. By the way, I guess I should tell you people out on TV the truth. Especially we have some decent viewers. The cable service is expanding. We've got some very nice people in Iceland and Indonesia now seeing the show, and I should stop. The reason this backdrop and all, several months ago, we were thrown out of the place that we used to call the studio. We were actually filming this out in a parking lot. And I keep saying to the studio audience, what we've got out here is, I guess homeless would sound better than drunks and winos. And we've been handing out free beer and stuff, and so, well, I always feel like honesty is the best policy. I don't feel that way, but I said it. But anyway, before we start, the ones that these people, it's a nice thing about having numbers because even people in this condition can check a number. No offense whatsoever to the fine reading that was just done at the Kyroots, but two of them, I don't think Kyroot put down enough punctuation that they didn't come out exactly right. But I just wanted to read them in case no one requested or we don't get down to it. It was that someone wrote into Kyroot and asked, according to this, why would anyone in your audience be dumb enough to allow you to equate fear and guilt with stupidity? And Kyroot speculated, stupidity maybe? And the other one it's just, I happen to know what Kyroots, the kind of spin that it was this one, page 61. A man in a coma writes, I do not plan to be in this coma forever, you know. Okay. I sure hope that either nobody requested that one or that we don't have time to get to it because I'm not sure what to make of that. But it does make sense. I just wanted that the man in a coma took the trouble to write and say, I do not plan to be in this coma forever, you know. Where's a threat, a promise? Should we feel encouraged? Should we feel frightened? God, I hope, let's see, did anybody request? Well, what am I worried about? I just like, it's not on there somewhere. All right, here we go. Page 1. I knew somebody would request this because this should be, again, just as a joke, we should start, or any you can. A whole new religion on this one thing. Right here it is for you people in TV land that are out of work. And you want something to do? Start a new religion. When they've worn out all these others, if you got any sort of taste for originality whatsoever, you know that. Even the latest religions, good one, fine, upstanding religions. Started to say the Lutherans, but there are people later than that. The later day Lutherans, even. But anyway, they're all getting old because they use the same material over and over. So anyway, here it goes. And Kyroots said, page 1. This one chap says he subscribes to, now you got to listen, the great hoax theory, which goes like this. He says that the greater the idea, the bigger a hoax it must be. You don't see the possibility for a religion? Well, now I'll grant you this, since we're being honest tonight. If you did start a religion like that, it'd go in the toilet. I might as well tell you that. But think about it. Because religion, any great religion, like any philosophy, but a great religion has got to be based on a what? A great idea. But this man says that he subscribes to the great hoax theory, which I bet as soon as that was read, some of you, if you had ordinary minds, you'd have thought that you could probably fill it in. Like everything maybe is a great hoax. Think of the subtleness, for those of you that have real unabridged dictionaries. Subtleness. The great hoax theory, which according to him says that the greater the idea, the bigger a hoax it's got to be. That is beyond me being provincial enough to say something like, boy, does that explain everything? That's beyond that kind of stuff. Just think about it one more time. You can hold your chin too, along with me. The greater the idea, and I don't see, by the way, I don't see even a drop of sarcasm on this. The man says, the greater the idea, he's not being funny, the greater the idea, you hear an idea and you, great. A cosmic, a metaphysical, an astounding. Does that cover great? I mean, is that enough adjective? The greater the idea, the bigger a hoax it's got to be. If you could live by that, God knows why you'd want to, but if you could, you understand, you wouldn't even have to call down at the bus station and say what time the bus is leave. You wouldn't even need a schedule anymore. You wouldn't even need a phone. Words from a conversation, not to be confused with a play by the same name, nearly the same name, by Truman Beckett. It was somewhere in that neighborhood. Words from a conversation. First line. It's 2 lines here. 2 different people, evidently. First guy, at least the neural network doesn't have commercials. And the second guy says, oh yeah, just stick around, Buster, stick around. I'm sure that you people can do your own version of that, but first guy, I guess, is being a little silly, saying the neural network, like the TV networks. He's saying at least what you think doesn't have commercials. And the second guy, they didn't ask us, but I bet, wouldn't we agree, the second guy's got to have a bit more on the ball because he says, stick around. And I guess if you're ordinary, you could say, my mind doesn't have commercials. Are you nuts? Now, if we were really ordinary, I could say something like, make some ordinary social commentator's observation and say, I tell you a problem, you have been so commercialized. You have become immune to even recognizing when you're being sold something. Huh? What are all words that appear to arise from human institutions? Except commercials. Now, I know ordinary religious people or political people could say, well, wait a minute, that's not true. One of my great allegiances is to conservative politics, liberal politics, to the Presbyterian Church. And you think that's not a commercial? The conversation, I could have made it a bit more specific, I guess, and it would be some version of that being the cutoff line, the crucible when you know that you have become mature. Forget the candles. Forget that instead of a red wagon, you get a subscription to Playboy. You would know I am now an adult, at whatever age it was, because I am now beginning to run commercials on my network. And, of course, do not see them as such, like this guy. He says that's the neat thing about having your own network, is at least you don't have to listen to commercials. But the second guy told him off, didn't he? Page 20. Page 20 is, have anybody ever noticed? That's always a real good. God, page 20 sucks. Jesus, who requested that? Well, just like I was saying, page 20 is always a bad page. I don't know why. All right, page 27. In fact, judging this audience, how about I can look at the page, what was requested, look at the number, and then see what it was, and look around and guess, whoever it was that requested this, exactly what it is that they're drinking. Like gin or beer, or, lighter fluid. I can look at it and tell. All right, the first part of this is one of those, as many of them are, it's like a 4-parter. But early one morning, suddenly with no warning, a mighty warrior leapt out of bed on his little tippy toes, waving his arms as he sang, oh, I'm a little butterfly, but none of his troops said anything about this, since they knew that still on weekends he could kick their ass. City lesson. The reason that some fables are famous and remembered and others aren't is that some of them make sense. Part 3. But whoa, said a guy. does a major league astronomer blame starless nights on his telescope? City lesson number 2. Always try and get in the last word if you want your original lesson to appear meaningful. You see what happened? See, those of you that thought all this meant something. Number 3 threw you off from number 2, which in this case was actually lesson number 1, which was the first addendum. You see? That it told you one thing, and then it had something in the middle, but then the last one said, you know, if you're going to make the one just before the last one make any sense, that should have been the last word. But see, by then it was too late. And of course, I'm sure some of you, if you were here with your parents, you'd tell your daddy, you know, would you go back to the guy running the merry-go-round and see if you can get our money back? Well, that's what happens in some of these. I hate to be offensive because I know many of us have relatives in the carny business and with circuses, but there's some of those rides that you throw up even before you get on them. That's when you wish you had your daddy with you. And Kyroots said, even when ordinary thought is not oblivious to the obvious, it still resists learning therefrom. This is connected to last time we were taking, if you remember, that Kyroots pointed out that the obvious is generally too obvious for ordinary people to learn anything from, to be of any use. Which, those of you that didn't like the first page, is another religion. In fact, it'd probably last longer, relatively speaking, than if you based it on the great hoax theory. Is that the obvious is generally too obvious to be of any use to an ordinary person. It just is. Now, Kyroots says, tonight, even when ordinary thought is not oblivious to the obvious, it still resists learning therefrom. That even if you take an ordinary mind, this is just a refinement, I don't mean to confuse you, it's just a refinement of the last one, that even if you could get an ordinary mind, which you can, it's like people, I'm sure it happens, that there are people that stumble in some of these other cities or turn on their cable TV and hear some of this, hear some Kyroots read, a few, maybe hear, these winos laughing out here on the sidewalk. And they hear and they get the impression like, well, this is supposed to be something meaningful, what they just read, that so-called Kyroot, and they think, well, damn, that's as obvious as the wart of my nose. And what's the point? Why are they wasting good cable time when they could be having, nude book interviews or something? Why are they wasting the time with this? Because it's so obvious. Well, at least any of you think you're absolutely wasting your time. Of course, they always would say in a way, this is so obvious. But it's always like there's a small quirk. Not as many, perhaps, as the Greek Isles. But people think, well, boy, this is obvious. What's the point? And somewhere in their little nervous system is, of course, it doesn't mean anything. But it's like just thinking, boy, is that a bland dish I smell cooking in the next room? And it's like just one quick olfactory whiff of some spice or something, that they've never even smelled. But anybody can survive that. You just change the channel. You look off. Back to the Kyroots. Even when ordinary thought is not oblivious to the obvious, it still resists learning therefrom. Anecdotal version of the above. The visible part of a drifting frozen mass said to a passing ship, I may only be the tip of the iceberg, but by God, Buster, I'm the part you got to watch for. Since that seems to be at least a cliche that got some reaction when I was trying to point out something about faux originality last time, there's one just as old as it can be, just as hoary as possible. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But now if you will forget nautical affairs and consider what people think. The only thing the ordinary people can think of is the faux original. The only thing they can think of is the tip of the iceberg. The only thing that the ordinary mind, the only track it runs along, is the obvious track. Forget the B&O or Amtrak, it's the obvious track. And so, if you get somebody's attention for a second, ordinary mind said, you realize that you think the same thing over and over and over, they could go, well, yeah. But then their attitude would be this. Would be like this iceberg. Yeah, I only may be the tip. Something gigantic. But it's talking now to ordinary attention, since even the ship. If you can do metaphor back and forth quick enough. A ship. Now, the iceberg is so big, so wide underneath the water that it may wreck it. But the man standing on the deck, what can he see? He can't see that. All he can see is the tip. The tip means the part above water. So the tip can say, or the ordinary man could say, wait a minute, what I'm looking at is too obvious. That's not everything. Don't point that out to me. There's got to be subaquatic. I assume you mean subconscious, yes? There's got to be subconscious strings, motivations, forces at work that are beyond the obvious. Could be, sir. Could be. Could be. We won't argue that for a second, but how about this? Can you see them? No. Back to the iceberg. The iceberg said, the part showing, told the ship, I may only be the tip of the iceberg, but by God, I'm the part you got to watch out for on the basis you can't see anything else. There may be more, but you better watch this. But where did the whole idea, the cliche, the truism of, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg? If anybody's following this, the point is that was a kind of pre-sold excuse about why the obvious doesn't mean anything. Because the ship can say, well, wait a minute, why should I worry about the tip of the iceberg? I'm no idiot. I know what happens to icebergs. You can have a little tip there, and under the water, let's say here's the water, and there's the tip of the iceberg. All right, and just how about this? Worst case scenario, for those of you that like tip of the iceberg. Worst case scenario. You understand? Here's the water. Understand? And you're looking out, and there's the iceberg, the tip, of course. Now, how about just underwater, just under there, just as soon as it gets below the water line, that dirty rat of an iceberg, as soon as it gets under there, it just goes, ugh. You understand? Like, no offense, but, like maybe a 50-year-old stripper who kind of, her weight shifted. Well, anyway, just below the water, suddenly the iceberg goes, ugh. You understand? So the point is, if you knew all this, or even suspected it, being a good ship captain, you say, all right, I see that little iceberg, the tip over there, but, and maybe a first mate. Or a third mate. Some guy just comes up and he says, well, that iceberg must be, hell, I'm estimating 200 feet away. We don't have to worry about that. The captain says, you don't know anything. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Those rascals sometimes, just as soon as they get below the waterline where you can't see them, they go. In other words, long before we get over there to where you see the tip, that you're saying it's safe to sail over there, to think over there. What are you talking about, talking or sailing? Come on. He says, before we get even close over there, we would hit something. We would go down before we ever got to the tip. Trust me. And maybe the guy thinks, well, I learned a lesson coming up here on the bridge and talking to this guy. The iceberg, the obvious, is a matter of distraction. The obvious, the iceberg, says, I may only be the tip, but I'm the part you got to watch out for. You understand how then it comes out that I'm the part you can ignore. Unless you still believe in the fates. Unless you believe that man is driven by some kind of destiny and playing out a role. Come on, folks. Shakespeare is dead. He dug that up. He was 1,600 years too late, but not that he didn't have a way with words, but come on, folks. This is a day of psychological man. There are other forces at work to say that this man seems to be, I don't know, no offense to you, sir, but you seem to be a dumbass. And the man would say, his personality would say, well, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, which is his personality. He'd say, you don't understand. I may appear to be a dumbass, but I was not always as you see me now. Now, below the waterline are these, I was abused. I was abused financially. I think nowadays it's supposed to be sexually, sir. All right, I was abused sexually, but I was also abused. The guy that abused me also took my money when he got through. I was abused in all possible ways. I am a walking, modern-day, semi-professional victim. So when you're saying that I am a dumbass, that's being too crude. When you say that I have seem to express a poor self-image, that I seem to be a man engaged in a kind of self-guilt, that I seem to be engaged in some kind of course of action in which I am inflicting harm on myself. The thing is, it is not because I want to. All you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. And so nowadays all you got to do is be civilized as you should, an ordinary person. And even if you're not interested, I mean, you simply accept it. You're supposed to. There's nothing wrong with that. The person says, well, I know sometimes I can be very aggressive. I understand that. I know how I can be. But God, if you'd know what I'd been through. And of course, nowadays you're supposed to say, well, I believe you. You don't have to go into all the details. I'm late. But you simply, there is more to the iceberg than the tip. The iceberg says in this Kyroot, hey, I may only be the tip, but I'm the part you got to watch for. I hope none of you feel like I'm really beating you with 2x4s, but this one, it's a religion. Because it's every possible way. The iceberg is saying, well, the iceberg, you can take it one way, is representing modern sophisticated men. That it is making all possible notations of subconscious, unconscious motivations. It's taking into account all possible motivations of a unholy, unprofitable spiritual nature. But it is also saying just the opposite. It's better than that, but it's also saying just the opposite. Hey, that may be true, but so what? Does that tell you any more? And an ordinary person says, well, yes, it does. We don't know everything that there is to know about a man's psychological makeup, but we're on the way. What if, and it's not true, of course, not literally, but what if you could look at the tip of the iceberg and, in a sense, tell more from the tip, that is the obvious, than the whole idea of, wait a minute, there's more to me than this. And you go, all right, I agree. And so you've got to take into consideration. If you're ordinary, you go, yeah, I agree. There's no doubt about it. But what if, and it's not just the opposite, but try and follow my finger. What if you can still look at the tip, and in a sense, right now, you could get more off the tip than you could all of the parts not showing. And a man writes in and says, does that have any connection possibly with the big O, the obvious? I thought he would never ask. Do you remember where we were? And Kyroots said, even when ordinary thought is not oblivious to the obvious, it still resists learning therefrom. Doesn't say it doesn't, but it resists. Anecdotal version, the visible part of a drifting frozen mass said to a passing ship, I may only be the tip of the iceberg, but by God, I'm the part you got to watch for. Double. Anecdotal version, still connected. This is why. Thus are churches constructed far from heaven, schools from knowledge, and human destiny from where it's going. Or else the ship would finally hit the iceberg. And don't take the cheap way and say, that's right, and we'd all be done for. No, you don't know that. But at least you would have quit moving. Of course, ordinary people think, well, that'd be the end. We'd all be dead and drowned. There's one thing for sure. The ship would quit moving. You would have reached some sort of destination. And only a crude sort would say, well, it's not the kind of destination I would consider to be propitious. You don't know what the hell it means. What does it mean? It's only ordinary people that worry about, well, where is the bus going to stop? A revolutionist understands this bus should not stop. But then a revolutionist understands I shouldn't be on this bus. Bye.